Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Chris Sheridan's TV series Resident Alien. Now, this is based on the graphic novel by Peter Hogan and Steve Parkhouse. I have not read it. Sorry. At time of filming, there are 2 seasons of Resident Alien up on Netflix. I've watched both of them with my partner. We basically binge-watched them. It's a good show. There is a bit of a Good Omens situation here, and I'll put a link to my video about Good Omens up in the top corner. Basically, this is a show of 2 seasons. And what I mean by that is that first season works really, really well. The second season is not as solid. It's not bad. I think it's actually the second season of Resident Alien is actually better than the second season of Good Omens in my estimation. But the first season is really tight, really focused. It is consistent and coherent. The second season, not as much. So we'll talk about both seasons. So the basic premise of Resident Alien is that we follow this character who is an alien. He was on a mission from his species to wipe out humanity. On the basic premise, as far as we can tell, that humans have been terrible ecological stewards. We are bringing global catastrophe to the planet, probably on the basis of global climate change, things like that. Though there seems to be a number of issues with humanity. But that's the basic premise. So that's the basic premise of the mission. He is here to wipe out humanity. Unfortunately, his spaceship gets struck by a bolt of lightning, crashes in Colorado, in the Rockies, and in order to survive on the planet, find the device that is supposed to destroy all of humanity, etc., etc., he has to blend in with the local human population. Fortunately, he can alter his physical appearance to look like something else, in this case, like a human. He happens to go into the cabin of a guy named Harry Vanderspiel, who is a New York City doctor who has come out to Colorado, as we eventually learn, as part of this sort of large conspiracy to cover up that a particular corporation has been poisoning the water, which has led to cancer in a number of local people. The alien ends up killing Harry and takes over his body and basically becomes Harry Vanderspiel. He learns to talk, he learns a little bit about Harry's background, but things pop up periodically. Like, Harry's estranged wife shows up for a few episodes, his kid shows up for 1 or 2 episodes, I think in season 2. So there are still these surprises about who Harry Vanderspiel is, etc., etc. But basically, this alien learns to walk and talk and use a human body, use human motor functions, etc., etc., largely by watching Law and Order. Eventually, the town doctor, Sam Hodges, dies. They realize fairly quickly that he's been murdered, and so they bring in Harry Vanderspiel because he is a doctor to look at the body, do an autopsy, etc. Harry gets sort of pulled in to being the town doctor for a little while. Then he's not the town doctor, somebody else is. That person gets, there's a whole series of things that happen. But basically, Harry becomes friends with Asta, who is the nurse. She is she's his friend, but he's only sort of her friend. She doesn't entirely trust him. He's weird, et cetera, et cetera. You know, there and all of this stuff. So a lot of the first season revolves around the central question of who killed Sam Hodges. It develops questions about what it means to be human, what it means to be part of a family or a friend group, and then it raises questions about sort of the ethics of killing versus preserving life, et cetera, et cetera. So those are really, I'd say, the three sort of central philosophical concerns of season one. The nature of being human, the nature of family, the meaning of family, friends, et cetera, and the ethics around killing. You can combine that with extremely good dark humor, gallows humor, this kind of thing. The performances are really, really good. Alan Tudyk plays Harry Vanderspiel / the alien. Tudyk is incredible in everything. Many of you who are sci-fi people or sort of history nerds, I think there's a good overlap on that Venn diagram. We'll know him obviously as Wash from Firefly and Serenity, as Watt from the Heath Ledger movie A Knight's Tale. He did something in one of the newer Star Wars movies, or TV shows or something. I haven't seen it. I don't know, but he's amazing in everything that he's in. Sarah Tomko plays Asta. She's really, really good as well. And then you have a really interestingly developed supporting cast of characters. Some of them function on sort of an individual level, like Ellen, who's the other nurse who works in this clinic, who's very sort of caustic, sarcastic, etc., etc. But then you've got a lot of character pairings, like Sheriff Mike and Deputy Liv. He's a very sort of overconfident, but he's sort of charmingly, not necessarily arrogant, although there's a version of arrogance there, but he's sort of charmingly overbearing. Whereas Deputy Liv is sort of submissive, fairly downtrodden, really, really smart. So we've got these sort of character dynamics that get developed alongside the main plotline. Also, the other big element of season one is that there's a kid. What's his name? Max Hawthorne. Sorry, for some reason I couldn't remember his first name. There's a kid named Max Hawthorne who has a like 1 in a million genetic mutation that allows him to see the alien's true form. So Harry has to deal with that, with this kid trying to sort of tell everybody that he's an alien, and everybody sort of being like, okay, Max, maybe stop being so insane. And Max becomes Harry's nemesis throughout most of the first season. So all of that is going on. The first season is really, really, really funny. It's really, really clever. It's very focused, again, on these types of issues. My one sort of major-ish criticism of it, and this applies to season 2 as well, although season 2 I think has bigger issues, is there is a tendency to have those very, like, I want to call it like after-school special type dialogue moments where somebody will be like, this is the true meaning of family. And it's this supposed to be this very sort of dramatic philosophical speech that reveals a great deep truth. And that's fine. But the show does rely on them probably more than is ideal. So that's not great. Season 2. you have the same basic cast of characters. What I think goes wrong with season two is season two. Harry is no longer trying to destroy the world. He has sort of agreed that humanity can get a reprieve. They eventually learn that actually there's some other aliens that are going to destroy the planet. Harry spends the beginning portion of the season trying to contact his home planet and say, hey, no need to kill everybody. Then they find out there's some other aliens who are going to do it, etc., etc. There's a whole like time loop thing where Harry got really, really, really old and he came back in time through a portal and painted a bunch of murals in New York City for himself to find, and then fossilized his dead body with an egg inside it, and Harry has to raise the kid, but also the general is played by Linda Hamilton is trying to get all the aliens and whatever. It's just there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's weird and complicated, and this is really where it breaks down, right? Is in the second season, which is much longer than the first season. Incidentally, there's several more episodes in the second season than the first season. It seemed like they basically tried to give every minor character or supporting character their own plot line. They just tried to cram a bunch of low plots or B plots or subplots or whatever you want to call it into this season. So Liv has a whole subplot where she saw a UFO as a kid and she's like following up on this and she's a big believer in all this stuff. Mike has this subplot where he sort of falls in love with this detective from the next town over, and that gets all sort of worked through awkwardly. Darcy, who's Asta's best friend, has a number of subplots, the main one being that she is in love with this guy named Elliot, but because she has a history of bad relationships, she is not confident that things will go well, etc., etc. The problem becomes the season is trying to do a lot of stuff, and because it's trying to do so many things, it doesn't really feel focused. The season feels very, very scattered, and some things just don't get developed enough to really justify them being there. Well, I'll give you a good example of this. Darcy has a subplot developed over 2, maybe 3 episodes where she gets hooked on prescription painkillers. The way that this is developed is she goes back to skiing. She had been an Olympic skier, but she had a fairly horrific accident. She stopped. She's getting back into it. She decides to immediately sign up for a tournament, which is probably a terrible approach, not being a professional athlete, but that sounds intuitively like a bad thing to do if you're just getting back into a sport. But she goes like very hardcore on training, and she damages her knee, basically, because her knee apparently is taking all the stress that would have been put on her ankle if she had not shattered it. So whatever, that is what it is. Harry gives her a prescription for painkillers. The next thing we see, basically, is she shows back up at the clinic, goes to Ellen, and is like, hey, I need a refill on these. And Ellen's like, this was a month's supply. You should not have consumed all of them by now. Addiction established. That's fucking it. That's all there is to develop that she's addicted. Yes, we get mood swings, we get this sort of she's lashing out at people, whatever it is. Fine. Symptoms of addiction, okay, maybe. Then she falls asleep at her bar. Elliot, her boyfriend, comes in, breaks up with her in a way that's seemingly not entirely justified by the events that we've seen, so that's fun. Um, then she goes to Asta's house and apparently spends a week detoxing, almost none of which we see. What we see is Darcy hanging out with Asta's dad, Dan, and playing video games and eating chips. But apparently it was a week of detoxing that they just did not feel the need to show us. This is so, like, these storylines in themselves could be quite interesting. Maybe. I don't know if getting hooked on painkillers is going to be that interesting, but you know what? It could be. But you know what I mean, right? But there's just so many of these subplots. Almost every minor character, supporting character gets their own subplot, each of which is supposed to feel like it has stakes. And the problem is there just isn't enough time to develop all of them. That's actually part of the reason I really like Ellen, because she never gets her own subplot. Ellen is just there being sort of rude and slightly skeevy. She has this sort of weird friendly rivalry with Harry. But yeah, I like it. I like that we have a recurring character who's just like, yeah, I'm here. I've got a minor role. Whatever. I don't need to have a big emotional moment where I teach some important life lesson or something like that. I think that's very, very good. And I think the show should have more of that, if I'm honest. Not because the characters are bad or uninteresting or anything like that, because they are interesting. But, again, you end up trying to cram a whole lot of stuff into the package, and it doesn't necessarily work fantastically well. Too much stuff.